Hi, this is Rob French, Rockin' Robbie SF on the ECF forums and Istara on YouTube. And a lot of people have been messaging me about how to re-wick the Stardust. So that's what I'm going to do. But first, what you need to get started is you want to have a multimeter. And this will test the ohms and to make sure you have a good connection. They range from anywhere from $10 up to $30, maybe $20 the average, and you can get some really expensive ones for $50 or $100, but you don't really need to spend that much on a good ohms meter or multimeter. And I'll link below. Mer Griffin on the ECF forums has a video on how e-cigarette users can use a multimeter, which is a great tutorial, and I'll link it below. The next thing you need is wire. This is 32 gauge, no resistance wire. It is fairly inexpensive. I got this on eBay for about $5, $3 for the wire and $2 for shipping and handling for 75 feet, which is going to last me forever. The next thing you need is wicking. Now, I do not suggest you get what I got. Do not get what I got. Do not get this tightly woven silica fiber. You can kind of unbraid it and get lengths of wick, but it's a real pain in the ass. If you're going to order from McMaster's, I'll put a link below, or I'll put a link to the ECF thread on this. If you get it, get the ceramic rope that is loosely twisted. And that'd make it a lot easier just to twist off whatever length you want. Do not get what I got. Or the other thing you can get is you can get wicking for CE2s or for rebuildable atomizers, and it's fairly inexpensive, maybe $3 for 3 feet. I saw them on Clouded Vapors, and there's a couple of other sites. Again, the link below for the ECF forum thread will have several links of different options to get different types of wicking material. So once you have the wire, your wicking, and a multimeter, which you probably want if you're going to do any type of electrical work, we can get right down to changing the wick on the Stardust. Now, if you've seen my previous video on the advanced cleaning, you know how to pull off the tank to get to this piece, which is the center of the Stardust. And this is what we're going to go to next. Now, the wicking on this is pretty good. I'm only changing it right now just to show you how to re-wick. This is a perfectly good Stardust wick, but again, I'm just doing this to show you how to re-wick a Stardust. First thing you want to do is to remove the old wick, and we can just pull it out. And there is what the wick looks like. Now, what you have on the inside of here is there's a little silicone sleeve about this big. And there is a core that runs in it that makes the positive connection. And we want to push out the core. Now, if you have some small pliers or some sort of tool to pull it out from this end, you're welcome to do that. But I found the easiest way is just to take a Phillips head screwdriver that will fit in here nicely and give it a push till the core starts coming out. Don't push this all the way through because there is a rubber stop gap in here that you don't want to come out. And there is the center core of the Stardust. Now, inside here I also pushed down a silicone sleeve, and you need some type of tool to pull it out. And I have a little hobby tool here that I'm going to use to pull out the silicone. There it goes. And this is all the pieces in the Stardust. And you'll see in the end the rubber gasket where the core goes into that separates the positive and the negative connection. So make sure that does not come out. Now when the core is inside, it's going to look like this. It's going to fit into the sleeve and come up about like this. And this connection, the wick, is one end is going to be on the inside for the positive connection and one on the outside for the negative. So it's going to look like this when we're done. So I already cut a little piece of wick that I'm going to use as my new wick, and I have a little piece of coil. Now the first one I ever did is I unwound the coil on the old wick, and I used an old CE2, the wire on the old coil, and I used the wick from an old CE2. And and you're welcome to try that, it's just hard to use this little piece of wire to wind it on a wick. Otherwise, get a nice couple-inch long piece of wire. Use a needle to sort of hold your wick in place, just to reinforce it, give it some force. And I'm just going to wind the coil around as tight as you can and as close as you can. Try to get 4 turns on it. So it looks like this. And then you can pull out the needle. And that is what we have. Now you want to cut the length of the wire. You do not want it to have it longer than this, than the sleeve, because under no circumstances do you want the wires to touch the wrong post, and this is what separates them. So you can take scissors or wire cutters. Oops, just kind of eyeball it. And that looks about right. The next step is to reassemble the centerpiece with the wick inside. The first thing we do is we take the silicone sleeve, we slip it in, we take our wick, and we want one end on the inside and one end on the outside. The inside is going to touch the positive post or core, and the outside is going to be the negative connection for the coil. I'm going to tightly squeeze each end of the wick as I push it down just a fraction. The reason why I'm tightly holding this is because the edges on this post will cut the wick, and you want to minimize that as much as possible. Now the hardest part of this operation is to make sure, that this little piece of metal on the outside, which is the negative connection, is tucked. You can use a little screwdriver to tuck it in between the silicone and the post. Make sure it's not sticking out. So when we push it down the rest of the way, it'll just slide in. Again, I'm holding each end tightly. And if you could see on the inside, you could use a needle if it's the coil's touching any end. We could do some adjustments on it, but it looks pretty good. And the truth of the matter now is if we have made, oops, forgot the most important part. Now we put the core back in. And this should just slide right in, get it started, and just push it down on the table or your working surface. And it should have now slid up into hard surface. I just needed a hard surface to snap that in. And it should now have fit up into the sleeve to make the positive connection and the negatives on the outside. So we want to make sure that this works. So we're going to, this is where the multimeter comes in. Put it to ohms. The positive red goes on the inside. And the negative goes on the outer screw. We're going to see if we got a good connection. 2.0. So that looks pretty good. Turn this off. So now we should try it on our PV. And let's see if it fires up. And it does. A little bit of smoke. Getting a little red. Now at this point, you could trim the wicks to the length you want. I used about 1 inch, and I kind of like it just a little long. You can make it your wicks longer or shorter if you want to cut it about here for how the Stardust normally is. But I think this is fine for me. So now I'm just going to reassemble it. As I did on the advanced cleaning video. This went in pretty easily because I've been taking it on and off when I clean it, and the more you do it, the easier it is to take this on and off. Okay, now let's fill the Stardust. This is the one we just did, using Strapple from Raw Vapor. And fill it right up. Put on the cap. This wick usually wicks pretty quickly. That's one thing nice about it. Let's give it a vape. It's actually a warmer vape on my homemade or my home wick model. Starting to get a lot of flavor, works perfectly. So now the question is it worth it to re-wick the Stardust? The amount of money you spend on the wicking material, I spent too much. I shouldn't have gotten that McMaster's wick. But if you order from, say, Clouds of Vapor and you get the wick there, you can get an ohms meter for $10. You can get a shorter piece of coil for a couple bucks. You could probably get a wicking, enough wick and coil and an ohms meter for maybe $20 at the least, or you could spend a little bit more if you want more supplies. And this little $5 to $7 Stardust is probably going to last me a very, very long time. And if you're a little bit worried about doing this type of DIY work, please, if I can do it, you probably can do it. If you can take it apart and clean it, you probably can go ahead and change the coil. and change the wick, and you'll get a stardust that will last you a very long time. So live long and vape.